So this is the point where I realize that I have chosen the most difficult project to start with. So I'm working on the very first project for my fairy tale series of patterns, and I've decided that I wanted to start with the Snow Queen for January. And my idea for this was to do a shawl, because if you've seen the movie version, which I highly recommend, she wears this gorgeous collar style necklace that like completely encases everything, and then this big fur or feather, it's not really a cape, but kind of sort of collary thing that it's just so visually striking, and something about that shape and the combination of everything being here in my mind just went shawl. So I decided I wanted to do a shawl that combines tatted lace, of course, and knit, potentially either lace or just something simple like a garter stitch or a stockinette. Not really sure just yet where I'm gonna go with that. And of course, as my brain is wont to do, I had this very firm idea of it needs to be a half circle shawl. So I have my little crappy little sketch drawing, because drawing knitwear is not my skills. And it's at that point that I realized that I have never actually knit a half circle shawl, and I have no idea how to even do the math for a half circle shawl. Neither have I ever combined tatting and knitting in the same project where it's not just like put together afterwards, because I very, very much want to make it's sort of a seamless thing where you can't, unless you really know what you're looking for, you can't really tell where the tatting ends and where the knitting starts. I don't want it to just be like a piece of tatting like slapped on top and call it good, because that's too easy. Why would I do that? Nothing can be easy, right? So I have no idea how I'm gonna do this. Yeah. So to start, I kind of started playing around with some lace weight yarn. So there's that, potentially part of something-ish, I guess. And I have a little knit swatch that I have made with the same yarn, just kind of playing around. And as I was doing this and playing around with increases, because all of the shawls that I have made in the past have all been triangles, which are very easy because you have increases down the middle and you have increases on both sides, and that's it. That's all you need. And it's very simple because you just do every other row and easy. So I have these samples, and as I was making this, I realized that I really sort of visually like the idea of making these increase rows line up with the points of the tatted bits, and like having it just kind of grow from there. So I did a second drawing, also crappy, but just to kind of get the idea. And this sort of, the idea behind this, these little droplet pieces. So if you're familiar with the story of the Snow Queen at all, there's several different versions, but in almost every version there's always a mirror, and this mirror is one that only shows the wickedness in people. It only shows the bad things. It will only amplify your faults. So in the story, the Snow Queen seeks to take this mirror up to heaven, And in doing so, it either slips or it vibrates and shatters, or it falls and shatters. But the premise is that this mirror shatters into thousands and thousands of tiny pieces and scatters throughout the world on the wind, and that when people get these pieces in their eyes or in their hearts, they begin to only see the evil in other people. They only see the bad in other people. So I have this visual imagery in my head of these tiny, tiny pieces of glass that are just scattered everywhere. So I bought beads, a lot of beads, a lot of very shiny beads. And my idea is kind of to use these to simulate both snow and ice and glass and this concept of these tiny, tiny pieces. So once I have the pattern, which will happen somehow, I want to put these absolutely very, very sparkly and all over the place. I have like a billion of these little tiny crystal beads. And I have 3 different sizes of the bicones, which are this shape. I don't know how well the camera is gonna focus on that, but it's this little, like, I don't even know what kind of shape it is. And then I also have these very shiny sort of teardrop shapes that I want to put on the end of the shawl somehow. So that's where I'm at with it right now, and I have this very clear idea of this is what I want and absolutely no idea how to get there, but we're gonna work it out and see what happens. So it is a very rainy Sunday here, so my lighting is not all that great, but this is what we have so far. I finally finished casting off like a zillion of these sections last night, so this is my test mock-up for the shawl portion of this project. And I intentionally made this shorter than what I actually want, just to try and save time. I do think that I probably fucked up my increase rows, because my shape here is a lot more than a half circle. However, I kind of really like this shape. It's almost more like a cape, like a little capelet, instead of just a half circle shawl, and I'm kind of digging it. So we'll see what I end up keeping when I finally get around to doing the real version. So part of the reason that I needed to do a mock-up for this is because I have no idea how this is going to behave with the knitting and the tatting being joined together and then blocked. And I really want to be able to do the tatting directly attached. So I have all these little markers here where I'm going to attach this piece. This is my sample piece of my pattern that I worked up that I want to do, but I have more sections than what this piece is. So my next step is to work this section, attach all of that, and then I also had this idea. I want to do these little inset diamond shapes kind of down here, which is why I had a zillion different sections that I had to cast off. So the idea is to go ahead and put all the tatting on it and then wet block the whole thing, because lace knitting almost absolutely has to be wet blocked. And I know from past experience that this is going to like completely change the look of everything once this is wet blocked. So that's where I'm at with it now. And that's what I'm going to be doing today. Hopefully I can get through, it's probably a little ambitious because it's already afternoon today. I would like to get this piece done and at least come up with a pattern for these sections because I don't have that worked out yet, and get maybe 1 or 2 of those done today. So we will see where I end up. Oh, and also, because this is just, this is some fingering or lace weight that I'm using from Knit Picks, because I picked that because it was a little cheaper. The texture's okay, but it was not exactly what I wanted. So I have the real yarn that I would like to use for the actual final version, in white, of course, because why not? It is snow after all. This is from Juniper Moon Farm, if I can get it to focus. Let's see, there we go. So this is called Finley from Juniper Moon Farm. And it is also a lace weight, but it's a little bit more tightly spun. It's a little smoother. And it is so soft. I wish you guys could feel this. It's seriously amazing. Hold on. There we go. It is 50% wool and 50% silk. So once this is worked up and blocked, it's going to be amazing. But because this is like $25 a skein, it is not cheap. So for just mock-ups, I decided to go with something a little bit more price manageable. Yeah, so now we don't want to focus on that. Okay, so I'll be back later with more updates, I suppose, or just like in a few seconds, because for you it will all be cut together and super fun to watch, I hope. Okay, bye. One of the questions that I get a lot is, how do I design things? Like, how do I come up with this pattern, and where do my ideas come from for how to make things happen? And this is a really difficult question for me because my design process is usually I load my shuttles and I just see what happens. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. More often than not, it works, which might just be part of my thread witchery, or might just be luck, or the fact that I have been doing this a very long time, and tatting is very mathematical. And so after doing so many different patterns, so many ways, you start to notice that there are very specific ways to accomplish specific shapes. But occasionally I do have an end goal in mind with wanting a piece to have an overall shape when it's finished. Another example of this would be my crush pattern that I did last year, the heart motif. I very specifically wanted it to be a heart, and so I spent a lot of time drafting that and drawing it out in order to try and get the shape that I wanted, and I had to play with it several times to get the end result that I was looking for. So usually the way that I do this is I will start by drawing the overall shape that I want, and then just playing around with filling that shape with sketches of different designs and different ways that I could accomplish that, just based on my knowledge of how certain elements in tatting behave. So for this portion of the shawl, what I really want is for a diamond piece inset down here, but because I have these lovely little teardrop shaped beads that are sort of kind of teardrop shaped, I want these to actually be the focal point down at the center. So the shape that I'm looking for is not exactly a diamond, it's almost more like a teardrop shape, but a little more pointed on the bottom. So I know what I'm going for, and I know where I need the piece to fit, and I'm just gonna play around with some sketches and then try working the sketches up and seeing what I can come up with. Fortunately, because knitting is so very elastic and very forgiving, and this has not yet been blocked, I can play with the amount of ease, I guess, that I have between these two pieces. So I don't need it to fit a very specific angle. I can kind of open it up more or close it up more depending on what my finished tatting piece ends up being. So that's where I'm at, and that's what I'm gonna do. Well, it only took me 5 more tries, but I finally have a piece that I am happy with. You can see that it is quite different from my original sketch. What I realized as I was working the piece was that I had too much in the middle and that I needed to kind of downsize everything to get a little bit of a smaller area here in the center so I could kind of pull everything in where I wanted it to be. So these will just fit down at the bottom of the shawl like so, and sort of open those sections up, anchor everything, and give it this kind of scallop treatment on the end. The final piece that I'll be doing will be one solid color. It's all going to be just the white. So my hope is that by doing it this way, it will help to kind of pull the knitted lace and the tatted lace together so that it looks like more one cohesive piece. I wanted to do this one in 2 separate colors so that I can see how the 2 elements kind of interact together after everything's blocked, just to help my brain kind of keep track of where everything ends up. Plus, I do think it looks kind of neat with 2 colors, but maybe that's just me. One color will also be cool. Hopefully, we will see. Yeah, so I just need to make 15 more of these, I believe, is how many splits I have. And I will attach them as I go so that everything is all connected and I don't have to sew them in, which would be a gigantic pain in the butt. And then that's the last step before blocking. It's done. So all of the little motif pieces are in. As you can see, the overall final shape is much closer to a full circle as opposed to a half circle. I am okay with this. We will block it out and see what happens.
just taken the shawl off of the blocking mat and trying it on. I do see some things that I think need adjusted just a little bit. The biggest thing is I'm not super thrilled with how this edge here it looks, so I'll probably be reworking that. Also, as I was laying it out, these sections here I couldn't get to block completely open because I screwed up the increases a little bit, and they are actually much fuller than a full circle to be able to lay it out flat. So I'll be adjusting that a little bit. I also do think it needs to be much longer and maybe just a tad wider. I don't know. I actually really kind of like this shape. I think, especially from the back, it really does exactly what I want it to do. So I'm pretty happy with that overall. Just a few little minor details to write up and sort out before I start on the real one. But yeah, not too bad for a first attempt. So now I just need to do it bigger and with beads.